list of participants. So if you do have a challenge with your audio, she might be able to assist you. Just make sure that you have your devices plugged in, maybe your headphones or your audio on. So again, welcome to the Dear Neighbor series for the U.S. Federation of the Sisters of St. Joseph. My name is Sister Bethany Welch. I'm a Sister of St. Joseph of Philadelphia, and I'm also the JPIC coordinator for the Federation. We're so grateful that you're here. We have some wonderful guests today, and we'll just take another minute as people are coming in from the waiting room, and then we'll begin with our prayer. So again, welcome to the Dear Neighbor series for the Federation in this month of December, where our theme is restorative justice, particularly a look at our pilgrimage that many people participated in this past month in November. We ask that you stay muted so that we can hear from our panelists, as well as you can accompany us, unmute for the prayer. But then we'll have some time later for question and answer, as well as you can come off mic at the end if you'd like to just say hello to anyone on the call. All right, well, let's go ahead and begin with our opening prayer, which for the Dear Neighbor series is our consensus statement. So in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Stimulated by the Holy Spirit of love and receptive to the Spirit's inspirations, we move always toward profound love of God and love of neighbor without distinction, from whom we do not separate ourselves, and for whom, in the following of Christ, we work in order to achieve unity of neighbor with neighbor and neighbor with God. In humility of the incarnate Word, in sincere charity, in the manner of St. Joseph, whose name we bear, in an Ignatian Salesian climate, that is, with an orientation toward excellence, tempered by gentleness, peace, and joy. And to this we say, Amen. Again, we're so grateful that you've joined us for this Dear Neighbor series on restorative justice, and particularly a look at the pilgrimage to Selma and Montgomery that several people went on from across the Federation. We always have a maxim for the Dear Neighbor series. And so for this one and this particular theme, which had so much to do with bearing witness to past suffering and current harms perpetuated by individuals and very much by our structures and systems, I thought that this maxim, Maxim 98, is a invitation for us today. Suffering touches everyone. Unite yours to God and all who suffer. Or in the high school translation or version, we have, when times are tough, find solidarity with those who suffer without having a voice. So before we talk a little bit about the pilgrimage, I just want to have Sister Rita Ann share a little bit about the history of restorative justice, particularly as it relates to the Congregation of Joseph, who has done so much work in this area and has helped to launch the Catholic Mobilizing Network, which was both our host and our convener for the National Catholic Leaders Pilgrimage to Selma and Montgomery. So Sister Rita Ann, we welcome you to share.
It's an honor to be with you this morning. Thank you so much. And your maxim was absolutely perfect to the opening few comments that I'll make about Catholic Mobilizing Network. In talking about Catholic Mobilizing, what I thought might be a good entry would be just to put up a copy of our report that bears the new logo. Within 2025, Catholic Mobilizing went on a study and a time of reflection and discernment to update the logo. And what it really does is try to say just what that maxim did. Let us unite with all creation in its suffering in order to also unite in its redemption, in its wholeness. And so the logo in the red circle, which is open at the top, shows the global presence of God's mercy and redemption as not only signified by the cross, but by the Easter resurrection. And that is why Catholic Mobilizing exists with a twofold mission to end the death penalty and to transform the criminal justice system, and to do that by and through the practices of restorative justice, which seek to look at what is the harm and what can be the beginning of healing. And so Catholic Mobilizing really does image, witness, show the real double union that we as Sisters of St. Joseph and associates give witness to. That is the unifying love of God that brings all together for the good, for the mercy, the compassion, the redemption, the salvation of every individual and all creation. So restorative justice really plays a very active role. Catholic Mobilizing really goes back to our own Sister Helen Perjean and a laywoman by the name of Karen Clifton. And in the beginning, the dual restorative justice practices and ending the death penalty was present, certainly, and became more present when Catholic Mobilizing became a sponsored ministry of the Congregation of St. Joseph in 2014, and then a member of the Mission Network in 2019. And along with all the efforts locally and federally to abolish the death penalty, restorative justice is a key way to do that. Because restorative justice begins with a matter of the heart. It begins with dignity and respect for every human person and the possibility of God's grace for forgiveness and redemption. And there have been 3 national restorative justice convocations over the past years. One in 2014, which was at the Catholic University in Washington, D.C., 2023, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and 2025, just recently this fall in Atlanta. And the gift of those conversations is that it brings together, again, for the sake of unity and interrelatedness and the deepening of relationship within systems, it brings together the penal justice system, lawyers, defense attorneys, activist groups, and men and women of our Catholic Church who have set about to bring about healing and restoration through the practice of restorative justice, whether it's in programs like we'll talk about today, or in houses where those who have been incarcerated perhaps have received a commendation will be able to begin to live life more wholly than they were able to do it in prison. So our work with Catholic Mobilizing Network is really the work of the charism, the work of God's unifying love. And we have a wonderful board and staff and executive director who we are very fortunate and truly blessed to have to be carrying out this work on local levels and on the federal. So thank you very much for being here today. Thank you for all the work you are doing in your individual and group wise to bring about the restoration of all in God's love. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rita Ann. Just going to go back to our PowerPoint here and just share a few photos of the experience of pilgrimage. As the JPIC coordinator for the Federation, I also sit on the Catholic Mobilizing Network advisory group comprised of religious, both men and women religious, to help guide and also inform and then to receive information about this important work of restorative justice and ending the death penalty. And so going on this pilgrimage for me was, I think, a foray into this space, one that I had not worked in previous iterations of justice work. And so I was very much struck as we began our journey with the legacy museums and the legacy sites in Montgomery of this quote, which I think pairs so well with the maxim to both not forget those who suffered and died, but because they asserted their basic human right to be free. And so as we seek to be in solidarity with those who have suffered, may their memory both be a blessing and an invitation to action. Just a couple of pictures to share with you before I invite our other panelists, pilgrims, to be able to share their story. Here is the full pilgrim group that in the beginning of November ventured to Selma and Montgomery. This is on the steps of the Dexter Avenue King Memorial Baptist Church, where Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King was pastor for just a short period of time as he was involved in advancing the civil rights movement in Alabama. As Sister Rita Ann mentioned, there are so many people both on this call today and across the Federation who are engaged in this work. And some of those were able to join us. I think there were 10 I counted CSSJ affiliated folks. Some of those are in direct service with people returning from experiences of incarceration. Some were people that have been longtime ministry with the Black community and working on civil rights and human rights issues. And then others are maybe newer to the work and are spending their time getting to know, like I did, more of the first person history. I'm from a generation that didn't get taught as much of this in school as perhaps others. And so really trying to update my own learning and ongoing formation. Throughout our various experiences of pilgrimage, we had different opportunities to walk and share and be prayerful, to participate in liturgies, and to just hear the voices and to see the spaces where so much important work has been undertaken, particularly around voting rights and other civil rights issues. We'll let our other panelists share a little bit about who are pictured in this, the quilts, this unity quilt in Selma that we saw. And then for me, just I'll say this by way of conclusion for my portion, that we prayed beautiful Stations of the Cross focused on sorrowful mysteries and experiences of suffering. And this one we prayed particularly on the parsonage porch where a bomb was dropped in an attempt to end the life and disrupt the work of Martin Luther King and his family. And so that was a really probably the most powerful moment for me as I experienced pilgrimage together. So then I would invite Sister Erin and Sarah and Rita Ann, whatever order you feel comfortable sharing, a little bit about what your experience of pilgrimage was and maybe the connection and restorative justice means in your ministry today.
I could jump in first to get our sharing started. First and foremost, just to say that, time is far too short to probably share so much of what is in my heart and the fruits of the experience. And also to say that I think the pilgrimage experience for me was something that I might say I'm going to continue to mine from for years to come, kind of going back and continuing to unpack and learn and rummage around for God in that. So really what I'm about to share is probably just like a small snippet of the enormity of what this experience was for me in this particular moment. The first thought that I had as I was reflecting on sharing today was, the ways in which our charism calls us to movement, to kind of openness. And so I was thinking, we say Sisters of St. Joseph, that we move always towards profound love of God and love of neighbor, from whom we do not separate ourselves. And the word movement was just significant for me. And of course, pilgrimage and movement are interconnected, but I was thinking really more of that inner spirit space. And, kind of again, that portrait of a daughter of St. Joseph, this invitation for like eyes open, ears attentive, sleeves rolled up. And why I'm sharing all that is to say that this, for me, really spoke to the ways in which the charism calls me and calls us to kind of always be committed to the ongoing formation and dialogue and experience that is needed to be in solidarity. The work of racial justice, the work of dismantling systems of white supremacy, and even systemically, but in myself, in my own thoughts and words and actions, is just this constant ongoing process of prayer and discernment and openness. And, so I was really just reflecting on this invitation from our particular pilgrimage around, where is the invitation to lean in and where is the invitation to kind of lean back? I think of it just in the sense of, invitation to more space to reflect on how my identity as an overly privileged white woman, where is my space? So thinking about how I too dismantling, white supremacy in my own actions and words, and I think the connection, especially, we certainly looked a lot at the history, and there was so much to learn there, and I was deeply appreciative of the way this pilgrimage was also in dialogue with today's current realities. That was also really significant for me. And I had actually done a similar racial justice pilgrimage in Alabama before COVID. And I was really struck by the similarity and yet the differences and the evolutions in that time period, not only in what I was experiencing in Alabama, but also in my own heart and my own, journey with God and with the invitation of solidarity. And so this time around was especially struck by the story of racism that continues systemically in our country today, in the criminal justice system, in the education system, in the voting rights system, the many ways in which our country and our culture in some ways feel like they're really moving backwards, the great concern that brings for me, and I think really the invitation of like, what is mine to do, and kind of looking at the signs of the times. How does the charism call me to be an agent, a catalyst of unioning love and reconciliation in these times, and especially in my community where I have relationship and connection? And I think it inspires me to be more open to listening, to dialogue, and to being in spaces where I'm attentive to those who are experts in their own experience and their own community. And, how am I entering into that solidarity with an intentionality and a discerning spirit and a real openness to what does that collaboration towards creating a more just society look like, a faith that does justice in these times. So those are just a few thoughts, and I'm not sure, hopefully, that we didn't coordinate ahead of time. So I don't want to say too much more. I want to make sure there's space for others, but those are just some initial thoughts that I had. So thank you.
Thanks, Erin. Sarah, how about you? What was the experience like for you?
Sure. So I'm newer to the mission of CSJ and the charism, but what I've found in my about 6 months now of being part of this organization is that my own spirituality reflects so much of what the CSJ mission is. And so the opportunity to be somewhat of just an employee in one of the ministries who had the opportunity to do this pilgrimage, um, kind of like Sister Erin said, just open my heart and my eyes to the realities that are just ever present. In Chicago, so I'm part of the LaGrange Park community here in Chicago. We are kind of spotlighted, not for the best reasons right now, given our current political climate. And I was thinking about my neighbors who come from different places over and over and over again on this pilgrimage. So that constant present reality of racism, injustice, inequality, I thought that Catholic Mobilizing Network did an amazing job of putting the past in conversation with the present, of looking at the things that maybe feel resolved, but in reality have just shifted or taken on a different persona or image. One of the most meaningful parts of this experience for me was the Legacy Museum. It follows the journey of enslaved peoples through our present day mass incarceration system here in the United States, and really walks you through every single step of the process of why we are in the reality we are in today. And that was just something that they've never taught me in school, something that people don't want to talk about, something that gets buried. So to have it right in my face and in my heart was really emotional, but also inspired me to share the information with others. So at the Well, we have the opportunity to bring in all sorts of different people, to give all sorts of different programming and events and prayer services and experiences about how injustice impacts our communities today. And so it has inspired me to continue those invitations and highlight people who maybe wouldn't otherwise get their voices out there. So I just want to be someone now who magnifies the voice of those who are suffering and those who have had these experiences firsthand or who are doing the work firsthand, to make our world a more loving and united place.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Sister Rita Ann, any other words for us before we open it up for questions?
Well, both of you were so articulate, and I so appreciated what you had to say. And being a board member of CMN and really working with the development of this, just to hear your responses is truly a gift and strengthens me to know that into the future, we really need to continue in a directional way these pilgrimages as we can. And I think that's the comment I would make. It was wonderful to be with Catholic leaders. I think the pilgrimage is a wonderful place to see the church in action, not in action only in Montgomery and Selma, but everyone who was there carried the church of their local area and will go back to that local area and be even more responsive, more aware of where there are injustices and suffering. And traveling that journey in Selma and Montgomery as a community of leaders, of faith leaders called, is really a powerful experience of church and enlarges the gift the church will be when we all went back to where we were coming from. And particularly, I carry with me the librarian who was a foot soldier, pardon me, during the whole time in the early days of Selma as a young girl. And if she can continue on and be a foot soldier, then so can I, because a foot soldier carries that unifying love for all of God's people, and you can be that everywhere, anywhere. So it was a time of renewed calling for me and a real experience of what it means to be church.
Thank you so much. If you have a question for our panelists, I invite you to put them in the chat or to raise your hands. All right, so we have a quick one. Here we go. From our executive director, Sister Deidre, what was meaningful for you about engaging this reality in the spiritual practice of pilgrimage rather than visiting on your own? So rather than a solo trip, what was it like to experience it as pilgrimage, particularly maybe the spiritual dimension of pilgrimage?
I can start with that one because I was thinking about this in particular. I think what made it so meaningful in the pilgrimage setting was we were on God's time. When I visit somewhere on my own, I anticipate a particular agenda. I want things to go a certain way. I rush through or I skip something at the, justification of something else that's meaningful. But with pilgrimage, you're forced into flexibility and patience. And I think it allowed so much beautiful time for reflection while we were there. And one of the other things that was so meaningful was the connection that I got to make with the other people who were walking this pilgrimage with me, who, like Sister Rita Ann said, would then be bringing this experience back to their communities and the church and all of these different places in the world. So I'm so grateful. I hadn't been on a pilgrimage in quite a while, and this has really inspired me to hopefully do this more often and get this going for the well in some way. So thank you for the question.
Just a quick additional thought, certainly echoing what Sarah has shared. I mean, I personally, I love pilgrim spirituality. And as was shared, I think with it comes a real spirit of intentionality of entering into the experience and a real sense of this is about kind of walking with God and doing so in community. And so it does shift the focal point kind of away from necessarily a touristy, no measurement of good or bad, but kind of shifting away from a more tourist experience, which can also be rich and meaningful, but it really does sort of shift the focal point a bit more to this is about walking with God and really, as Sarah said, sort of opening the space for what is God inviting me and us to, especially when sharing it in that communal experience. And Pilgrim spirituality really invites us to mindfulness, to this like living fully in the moment and trusting in God's providence. And, I think that was significant for this particular experience as well, to be fully mindful and present to the moment and to those with whom you are sharing it in a way that can be a bit different than when I travel for fun or when I travel for, vacation or things like that. And I would say I would add just one more quick piece, which is they used art as the storytelling. So the Legacy Museum and a number of other, the Peace and Justice Memorial, they really, for me at least, it felt like they use really art, this very interactive, very dynamic storytelling through visual arts, and oftentimes even this complete 365 like sounds and texture and imagery that just invited you into the story of the experience of people of color in the United States who lived through slavery and into the Jim Crow era and into today's reality of racism in the incarceration system. And that to me for Pilgrimage 2 really invoked a more affective experience of God. That it wasn't just this intellectual, I'm learning the numbers and the stats, but the use of art, I feel like really drew me out of my head and into that heart space, that sort of mystical experience of God for me. So thanks.
The last word to Sister Rita Ann, and then we'll close us out.
Well, in response to your question also, Deidre, everything was so well mapped out and organized that when we moved, I didn't have to worry where was I going next or what was going to happen next. I could be in the space where God would call me to be, even as I walked from building to building or museum to museum or sat on the bus or the boat. And so it was pure gift that I was invited into a time of real sacred being and being in the presence of a God through those that I was with, whether we were sharing in a small circle of prayer or whether we were just riding or walking together. It was being done for me and a gift to me that left me free to really hear and feel where was God for me in all of this.
Thank you each so much for the beautiful reflection and just your personal experience of having entered in so fully into those what feel like brief 3 days, but also so rich in the space. I'm going to just ask Erin to give us a quick commercial for a Catholic Mobilizing Network offering that is specifically for women religious. There are a number of other programs that are coming up, but I put in the chat the link if you are a sister or if you are connected to people, if you're a JPIC promoter and want to share this with your sisters, please do. So Erin, what is Conversations in Communion?
Yes, great. So there are also, I think, 2 other cohorts that they are offering this spring. So there is one specifically for women religious, but there are also 2 other cohorts. So if you are interested, certainly contact Catholic Mobilizing Network. I would say in short form, the training to facilitate conversations in communion is really about, it's founded in the circle process, and it's really reflective of synodality, the ways in which our Catholic Church is inviting us to be in dialogue and discernment. And so the Conversations in Communion through CMN really is to establish a learning community in which you share an immersive experience of circle process. Participants learn about this practice's alignment with Catholic values and the synodal approach, which emphasizes deep listening, making room for the Holy Spirit, and journeying together in faith. It really is a space that allows the Holy Spirit to show up. And I think it's particularly helpful in spaces in which, there's a sensitivity to wanting to ensure that each person's voice and experience and thoughts have space and are heard and are honored and are discerned well by the group. For me, I did the training and earlier in the fall or in the summer, and it was I think a really powerful experience personally to learn how to enter into space as we talk about solidarity, you know, how to be sensitive and aware and attentive to group dynamics, especially knowing for me as a white woman, there's a tendency to take up too much space, you know, perhaps, or to dominate space even unintentionally. But for me, it helped me in that sense of awareness of how to be in solidarity, in communal sharing space. But I think there certainly is richness of graces for many people in many different ways. It's not quite the same as a restorative justice circle. That's just a little bit different, similar principles, but it's a little different training, just in case that's meaningful for people. This is really something you could use with, you know, your parish or in your nonprofit ministry, or, you know, if you do faith sharing groups, or it's very applicable to many spaces, and really is a wonderful opportunity to learn a way of being together and sharing and discerning, that is very reflective of our Catholic values and the ways we're invited to be a synodal church. So thank you.
Thanks, Erin. I'm just going to put up our screen for Kristen Whitney Daniels as we conclude today to tell us what's coming up next month for Dear Neighbor.
Thanks so much, Bethany. And thank you, everyone, all of our presenters today for sharing. It was great hearing about your experiences and also learning about ways that folks can get engaged. Thank you, everyone who's able to join us today. As you may know, we at the Federation have the Dear Neighbor series, which meets the third Wednesday of every month. So at this time, 12 to 12:30 p.m. Eastern, 9 to 9:30 a.m. Pacific. It's essentially a bite-sized information sharing where we take what's happening at the Federation and bring it directly to you. It's a chance to hear about what's happening, to get plugged in, and also to ask us questions. We want to have that open communication with everyone as much as possible. For our first session in 2026, we are going to have Shannon Green, who is a member of our Leadership Council, which operates sort of as our board of directors for the Federation. And she is the first person to represent our expanded membership. So we have our sisters who are members, and then we also have our expanded membership. So anyone who associates with our charism can become a member. And what has shifted recently is that we have members representing that community on our board, essentially helping to shape the direction of the future of the Federation in relationship with everybody else who is there. And Shannon will share a little bit about her experience. It'll be a chance to ask some questions and hear about the direction of the Federation. And what's new is we are going to be asking everybody to re-register. We've had the same link for our Dear Neighbor series for about 2 years now. We want to give people a chance to off-road if they no longer want to do it, but also a chance to sort of clean up that list. So if you click the link that I just posted, we will also be sending an email out to everyone just to say, here's the new link for the new year. And we're so excited to see you in 2026. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And Bethany, any last words?
I just want to say thank you, Kristen, for all your work, for Stella behind the scenes on tech, for our panelists today, for some of our fellow pilgrims who joined us to peek on, join us at CSSJ just to see what we had to share, and we look forward to hearing their stories as well. And if you need anything, please reach out. Our Federation staff are excited to accompany you and journey with you in this work, either of restorative justice or any other things to live out our charism in meaningful ways. So if you want to come off mute and say hi to anyone, feel free to do so now.
I just want to say hi to everybody. It was a pleasure to be on the pilgrimage with you.
Hi,
And I
Leonard.
hope we can connect again at some point.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us. All right, friends, have a blessed rest of your day.